Nick.
What are you talking about, Anastasia? It's been New Year for like over a week now. Or do you not start New Year on December the 27th?
Apparently that is when the New Year starts, in the tennis calendar, at least.
I mean, by the way, again, back in the day, the Australian Open did sometimes take place over Christmas and New Year. Can you imagine watching a Grand Slam during that kind of break?
No, absolutely not. I think that would be like, this was as early as I think it could have been. And looking at the calendar, like looking ahead a little bit for the calendar for next year, things do go back to starting in January. I think they've already said the United Cup will start in January next year. I think I saw that somewhere. So hopefully things will push, where the new season starts in the new year. Tennis, you can do it. I believe in you. But this is the new year for us because we haven't recorded recently. If you've been listening to the podcast over the last 3 weeks, I would say, all of those recordings were done in like November. So this is fresh and new Anastasia and Nick.
Which is why we got super excited by United Cup matches that never happened.
Let's not talk about it. You know what? I was listening back to the edit and I was really proud of us by saying, barring any injury or barring any withdrawals.
To be fair, we'll probably talk about it a little bit, like some of the stuff we talked about, like the Zheng Qinwen Bitches Had Admire match that didn't happen. We actually got quite the replacement for it. So
we will get to that for sure. But everyone, welcome. Happy New Year, ground passers. Welcome. This is actually episode 2 of season 2, and we already explained why that is. But welcome. This episode, we will be talking about our Australian Open preview. The Australian Open starts in a week. Qualifying for the Australian Open starts tomorrow if you're Nick and Anastasia, or tonight, right? It starts tonight.
It starts in like 2 hours, I think.
What is time? Time is just a concept.
At this point for us, time is very wibbly wobbly. It's
yep.
If you normally it's in one of our time zones or close enough. If it's like CET, like an hour different for me. But when it's a completely different time zone for both Anastasia and I, nobody knows who's awake at whatever point.
No, not at all. But before we go into our Australian Open preview, which we have a special guest for, I'm very excited for this new segment that we're going to do, because obviously Nick and I haven't been to the Australian Open. One day, Nick, we will be. So we brought in the big guns. We brought in someone who's actually been to the Australian Open to help us out with our preview. But before that, there's been a lot of tennis going on in 2025/end of 2024. And we want to talk about it because it has been a fun time. So what have we been loving so far? Can we start with the United Cup? Because I feel like that's really it.
Yeah, United Cup is where it's been at. I mean, I've enjoyed watching Brisbane and Auckland and Hong Kong. But for me, United Cup has been where it's at. I mean, it looks like the Australian Open. It feels like the Australian Open with the size of the stadiums and everything. You've got the stars all out. And I was saying this to someone else earlier, was because it was a 10-day competition, it felt like a Slam or a 1000 event, especially
Correct.
Again with like all the great matches we were getting all the way through. Yeah, United Cup was the thing that held my attention. And it's a team event, and it actually has all the fun elements of a team event. And I have noticed from speaking to you, Anastasia, that you are loving every single aspect of how much of a team event it is.
So if you haven't watched the United Cup, please make it a part of your tennis schedule next year. Just take a few minutes to watch it. But it's a team event, kind of like Davis Cup, Billie Jean King Cup. In fact, in our little like social media blob, I was like, it's as if they, Davis Cup and Billie Jean Cup had a baby and it became the United Cup. But they have a team bench, which is right off the court. And the entire team is there. The team captain is there as well, which usually the team captain is either one of the coaches of one of the top players on the team, or in Canada's case, it was Felix Auger-Aliassime. He was their team captain and also played on the team. But it was mic'd up. The team captains were mic'd up so you could hear all the conversations and everyone. Not everyone was vocal. I remember there are clips of Lara Sigismund, who played for Germany. She did not want anyone to hear her. She always like covered her mouth, or she like backed away from the mic. She didn't want anyone hearing her secrets. Taylor Fritz was just a radio. He just talked nonstop. He was like breaking down stuff. I especially loved, there was one segment he did where he was playing doubles with Coco. And it was so insightful listening to him break things down and why he was doing certain things. And he was serving in a specific way because he didn't want to affect Coco. And then she was like, oh, no, it's fine. You serve the way you want. I'll be out of the way. That was fun. But I think the prize goes to the Argentinian team captain, who is a mix between, and I have to pull it up right now because I forgot to pull it up before.
What's his name?
Yeah, I forgot to pull it up before we started this. United Cup, Argentinian.
Well, this is getting cut out of the podcast.
Or leave it in so you can just enjoy it with us. But the team captain for Argentina, who I'm going to find in a second, I swear. Or not. Maybe it will take me longer to find his name. So please hold caller while I look up the Argentinian team captain. I'm leaving this in, Nick. I think I'm literally going to keep this in. Let me make sure this is him.
Carter's attempt at lift music.
At elevator music?
And the Backstreet Boys who could actually sing.
Ooh. Should have called him in instead. Wonder if he's interested in doing a tennis podcast. Anyway, finally found it. His name is Horacio de la Peña. He is a former player. He used to play back in the day. He doesn't play anymore. And he was the Argentinian team captain. And he was the mix between a loving father, a coach, a motivational speaker, just a loving parent. He was everything. And I remember I was watching a match with Tomas Echeverry, and he really wasn't playing well. Like you knew when you watch a player and you're like, oh, he can do better. So he could. And, Horacio was just like, he would interject with sort of like forehand this or serve this or whatever. But mostly it was just, you're the best. You're better. You're higher ranked than the person across the net. You should be able to beat him. Just believe in yourself. I was so taken with him. It helped me practice my Spanish because they were only speaking in Spanish. But I was like, I just want to record this and just wake up every morning and play it. I just want him to tell me that I am the best, that I can do it, and I am better than the person across the net. Because Thomas, he won the match. He was playing so badly, he was going to lose it, and he ended up winning that match.
Was that Billy Harris?
Yes, that was the match with Billy Harris. He kept being like, El Flaco across the net is not as highly ranked as you. And I was like, Billy Harris isn't that skinny, but okay. It was entertaining. It was very, very entertaining. So if the United Cup is not part of your schedule, it really needs to be. Because, Nick, it felt like when you said it felt like a grand slam, it really did. The matchups that we got were out of this world, especially on the WTA side.
Yeah, well, you had most of the WTA top 10 there. And when we say it's like early on, you were getting early clashes between like Fernandez and Zachary and not Zachary. Wrong
I think she played Coco too.
Fernandez and Goff.
Yeah.
And then who was the other team in that group? Anyway, it was Croatia. Yeah, Bekic in the mix. There were so many really, really good players. And then basically, if the semi-finals of the United Cup were like the semi-finals of a Slam or the semi-finals of a 1000, you would be very, very happy with the lineup on the WTA side. Like that would be like, that's almost perfect.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah.
That was the level that we were kind of getting with. I do think that, the ATP side, although the big stars didn't turn up, I think they did produce some interesting tennis. And actually, it helped, I think, Alex de Minaur get to be a top 8 seed at the Australian Open, which I think that the last time the Australians had a top 8 seed was Leighton Hewitt.
Yep. Yeah, he's really, I don't know, they showed some photos of him and he has really put on some weight, like some good weight, and is looking so much stronger. And, going into the Australian Open, you want to see things like, and that's why I think, there's something about a team event that I feel like there isn't that much pressure, even though I feel there were some players who really put the pressure on themselves, because when they do play for their country, it means a lot. But I think that team event kind of created a really great warm up for the for the Australian Open, and I'm really excited going into the Australian Open to see who carries on this level, who maybe levels up a bit. Because, for example, you were talking about Alex de Minaur. Australia didn't make it into the later rounds of the United Cup, but he looked good. He looked really good. So it would be nice to see.
Good. It wasn't, like he did his part. By the way, how disappointed were you that he did not get to play against Katie Bolter in the mixed doubles?
I think I wasn't as disappointed because she had kind of previewed it a little bit. I think she was asked in one of their early press conference, like maybe like a pre-thing with Great Britain, and they were like, "Ooh, how are you feeling about playing across the net from Alex de Minaur?" And she was like, "No, I'm not doing that." And I was like, that's fair. That's fair. I would have loved to see it. I would have enjoyed it to see that. I think it's all about bragging rights, right? Like, who's going to win the doubles in this household. And if you guys are wondering what we're talking about, Alex de Minaur proposed over the holiday break to Katie Bolter, who is his longtime girlfriend. I think they've been together for a while, but they're getting married. I mean, there was definitely, love was in the air. On the ATP side over the Christmas break. I think everyone got engaged.
Engagements or weddings.
So many engagements. And I really actually felt bad for Stefanos Tsitsipas because, again, during one of the pre you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
During
him and Zachary, who were not by the way. But one of them asked, which one of you is going to get engaged first type things. Like Zachary's in a relationship with anyone else. Stefanos Tsitsipas is obviously in a relationship with Paula Badosa. They were both trying to skirt around things as much as possible.
They were trying to point the finger at each other. They were like, nope, you're going to do it. And Stefanos was like, stay away from me. Take that question away.
I mean, also, how long has Tsitsipas been a thing? Like less than a year?
Less than a year, which in the middle of it, they already had like a massive Instagram breakup. So anyway, now we're
way too soon for anyone.
Yeah.
Take your time, kids.
Children, you have time. It's okay. You have a lot of time.
You're still young.
So yeah, I mean, okay. Super exciting. United Cup. Please watch. It'll be great. But there were 3 other tournaments happening and a challenger, I think, during this whole, So the other tournaments that happened, there was the Hong Kong Open, which is an ATP 250. We had the Auckland Classic, which the ATP are now going to go play there this week, but it was on the WTA. That's a 500 level event, right? Or is it 250?
No, 250.
That's a 250 as well. Okay, so Brisbane was the one that was a 500. Yes. And with Brisbane, the ATP were also playing, but for them, it was a 250. I like the joint events, like joint events forever. Just do that. So I have to say, for the first few days of all those tournaments, I really didn't watch it at all. I was too focused on the United Cup, and I was trying to prioritize sleep because the Australian Open is coming, and I don't want to be burnt out before it's even here. But there were definitely some moments that I would love to touch on. First and foremost, I want to say, because I think a lot of our audience anyway, at least some people have actually come up to me, are kind of like, where is Emma? And from Emma, I mean Emma Raducanu. And she had to pull out of Auckland.
It was Auckland, and it was a back injury, I think.
It was a back injury, yeah. And, with Emma, it's just like, that run to the US Open was one of just the grandest stories ever. And I think everyone just kind of is rooting her on to not replicate it, obviously, because that was a once in a lifetime thing, but wanting to see her more at the top of the game. We see Leylah Fernandez, for example, all the time. So you kind of want to have Emma back. And she's working her way back. I know they talked about she now has a new fitness coach. So I'm hoping everything improves, but it's just a bummer every time we start a new tournament and I get excited for her, like in the draw. And it's like, nope, actually, psych, she's not going to be in the tournament this time around. So I think the next time we're due to see her is the Australian Open, actually.
The actual Australian Open, yeah.
Yeah.
Pretty much. I mean, to be fair, Auckland was a crazy tournament because if you were an American fan, that was one of the tournaments to watch. It
felt like a home event. I was like, is this in America? I feel like it's in America.
Up-and-coming young Americans. But that tournament ended up becoming about a different Grand Slam champion.
Yes,
Naomi
it
Osaka,
did. Mm-hmm.
Which, she, everyone was so excited about. I actually didn't watch any of her matches because Auckland was the worst time zone of all to try and follow. It's 13-hour difference from me. That is the level of craziness. Like, the matches there started at 10 p.m. my time as the day session and was finishing in the mid. The final started at 4 a.m. I wasn't going to make that, but from what I heard, Osaka looked good, and she was. I've got back into writing again, and wrote a piece about player expectations on the WTA side, and what their minimum expectation should be, and what maybe they should do to try and push themselves, kind of as let's try and actually do something to measure a good or bad year rather than throw darts at a dartboard. That kind of thing. And I said, okay, so Naomi Osaka's minimum expectation should be finish the year ranked in the top 50. And because that's about where she's at, but would like to be a little better. And then stretch goal would be actually win a trophy of any sort on the WTA side. And she almost did that within 1 week.
She was like, I see you, Nick, with your goals, and I'm going to hit those goals.
I think her goals are probably higher than mine. I was being nice.
You were, but I really like your article. We'll link it below if anyone wants to get into the nitty gritty. But I liked your approach to it because I think what I've seen a lot around, which I've actually been trying to avoid weirdly, I don't like, because I feel like it affects my thoughts a little bit more where, people are being like, who are going to be the top 10 at the end of 2025? I'm like, I don't know. That is such a crazy prediction to just try and do on January 1st, decide who at the end of the year will be top 10. I think Jasmine Paolini should be your reason why you shouldn't try and do that. But, I liked your approach where it was sort of goal oriented. What sort of goals do you think these people should at the level they're at where they should be hitting. And I thought that was like really cool. So we'll link it below if you want to check it out. Because you did the top 25, right?
No, I did the top 8.
8,
and
okay.
then I did an additional 7 players that you will probably like see mentioned a few times. So Emma and Naomi I mentioned, and they're like outside the top 50, but obviously they're gonna want to have some kind of goal for it. But that's kind of the approach I have. And yeah, it's I think it's when you can actually say, okay, it was a good year or a bad year, because I'm the same as you. Like, you've got no data to predict off, and I don't like just making random guesses off gut instinct or personal preference. I could probably tell you based on the article I wrote with 6 players who I think will probably stay in the top 10 in the WTA side, but the other 4 will be completely random. And I think that's half the joy of it, to be honest.
Yeah, no, exactly. Which, speaking about half the joy of it and just the like the way you can't really predict these things is take the Brisbane WTA 500 event and guess who gets to the final? I mean, Aryna Sabalenka, who got to the final last year, she got to the final this year. I think the form she's in, she's the number 1 player in the world. You kind of expect it. If she didn't get there, it would have been an upset. But the person who got there that I'm like, I do not want to fall down a Kudermetova hole again. If you've been listening to this podcast long enough, you know that Veronika Kudermetova during the Madrid Open 2023 just stole my attention. I was like, who is this player? Never seen her before. I loved the way she played, and she made a really, really big run. And I was all in. I was like, she's going to be a Grand Slam winner. She's going to win all the titles and like all this stuff. And then she promptly disappeared. I was like, what happened? Why are you doing this to me, Kudermetova? Well, her sister, she has a sister. She has a sister who made it to the final of Brisbane, Polina Kudermetova. I don't know who she is. Nick, do you?
Well, other than the fact she's Veronika Kudermetova's younger sister, which has been primarily established. Polina was actually someone who kind of came on my radar towards the end of last year because she started winning a lot of stuff at Challenger and ITF level.
Okay.
And like she was, I wasn't watching those matches, but I could see her rising up the rankings, and like there was some noise around, oh, Veronica's sister's doing really well. And yeah, she qualified for Brisbane and then got to the final and had a really good run out of it and like made the most of the opportunities that she got. And there is definitely now some fuss around her. She's 21, so she's breaking through at an age probably slightly, not much older, but slightly older than you would expect for a WTA player. There's probably reasons for that. But yeah, Polina is now making a big fuss. However, she broke top 100 as a result. She's now top 60. Too late to be automatically in Australian Open Tour. She's playing qualifying this week.
Wow.
So she's going to be the highest ranked player in qualifying by quite some margin.
Wow.
But
tennis is tough.
Yeah, it is tough. But the same thing happened to Linda Noskova 2 years ago. She got to the Brisbane final, or no, maybe in Adelaide at the time. And same thing, she had to do qualifying because it was slightly too low. But like, we'll see Polina getting into main draws of slams and things like that more often. I think it is a name in tennis that you will see more often. Oh, and also fun fact, Polina is now higher ranked than Veronica as a result of her Brisbane run. She's overtaken her sister already.
Whoops.
Although it seems to be noticeable in sport generally, but particularly tennis, if you have siblings, the younger one does tend to outperform the older one.
You're correct. Mira Andreeva being one of those. She is the younger of the Andreeva sisters. So don't have a younger sibling and play tennis is what Nick is trying to say.
Don't let your younger sibling play the same sport as you.
Exactly. They should pick a different sport. Oh my goodness. That just reminds me of if you haven't already, you should check out our YouTube channel. And we had a little mini documentary about challengers. And at that challenger that I went to, I got to talk to Elliot Spizzeri, who is a new up-and-coming American player. He actually won a doubles tournament at Cambria, the challenger that also happened, among the other things that happened this week. And he has a twin. He has a twin brother, but who plays squash instead of tennis.
Smart move.
Very smart move. I was like, there you go. A twin brother that doesn't play. Because I think there's another American twin duo, but they both play tennis. Can't remember the name now, but when I do, I'll put it below. Because I think he went far in the junior tournament at the US Open this past year.
Just checking he has nothing of the Bryan brothers.
No, not the Bryan brothers. No. This is like a junior player. I will find it. I will put it in our show notes. What else? I mean, Nick, this was for the first week of a season. It was a lot. Is there anything else?
It's the same every year.
I know, but maybe I just forget.
And like, if we didn't have United Cup, it would still be like a slam because everyone's playing and wanting to get that court time in to start the year right, even if they're spread across multiple locations.
Right.
Honestly, the only thing this week was missing was Sinkeras action.
Correct. Yeah. I was actually just going to say the two players who chose to, where they did it last year and they're doing it again this year, they're not playing any warm-up events to the Australian Open. So they're going straight into practice in Melbourne right now. But I mean, we didn't even talk about the Novak of it all but here's one we should bring up because I feel like you have it in here and we should probably just mention it. Kei Nishikori is all of a sudden a factor, which if you're a new fan to tennis, you might be thinking, who? But if you've been here a while, he is a legend.
I mean, if you're an American fan, you might remember that he got to the US Open final about 10 years ago, 2014. Right. He lost to Marin Cilic. He beat Novak Djokovic in the semi-finals very famously. Does tend to perform well at the US Open, actually, because he also beat Andy Murray in the quarters 2 years after that. And in a very memorable match. And Kei Nishikori is a real fighter, but he's starting to become, I think, it's weird to me to think of Kei Nishikori as a veteran, because when I was in my kind of following tennis in my university days and following from Nishikori was one of the next gen that everyone was going crazy for, along with Grigor Dimitrov and Milos Raonic. And now Kei and Grigor are like the old men of the tour.
The old men.
What happened, guys? Time can be cruel.
Nick, I think they're trying to tell you, you are old too. No, we're not. We're not old. We're young at heart.
Yeah, guys, I'm. I mean, it's been true for a lot of recording this podcast, but I no longer have a 2 in front of my age.
No. Oh, shucks. Okay. But so he's back. He was playing in Hong Kong, got to the finals. He's been away from injury for so long, so it's nice to see him back and playing well. Another person returning into the scene who we will talk about more, I think, when we get to Player of the Fortnight, but Riley Opelka, who has also been out for a couple of years due to injury, all of a sudden makes the finals of Brisbane. And when I say all of a sudden, I know he was coming back, but he was not a factor in my mind. I didn't even really think about Riley Opelka
the last 2 years.
Yeah. So for him to play the way he did, he beat Novak Djokovic to get to the finals. That was an impressive run that for me came out of nowhere.
Which are you more impressed by, that he beat Novak Djokovic or that he beat Giovanni Pericard?
That he beat Novak Djokovic. Because the only reason why I say that is because I don't know if they were if both he and Giovanni Pericard were hitting on all cylinders during their match. It was an okay match. It was fun. It was fine. I put a little post on social media because there's always a discussion about the serve bot and is tall tennis boring tennis, because all they're doing is serving each other out and, you're not really getting any sort of rally play or anything like that. But I put a little how do you call these things? Poll. I put a poll out on Thread saying, how many serves do you think are going to be hit in this match? I put under 30. I put between 30 and 50, and then I put over 50. And everyone went for either 30, 50, or more than 50. And it was 22 aces. It was 22 aces in that match. And I think it just goes to show, like, those two players, especially Giovanni Pesci-Perico. I haven't seen Riley play enough, especially now in this recent time, but I've been watching Giovanni for a bit, and he's more than his serve. I think if he was just his serve, he wouldn't be doing as well as he's doing. He's going to be seated. He's going to be seated at the Australian Open, and thank God to all those top players, he's going to be seated, because I think that would be very problematic for them. If he wasn't.
He's been dangerous for a while. I'm surprised he hasn't run into a top tier slam yet. So, he's going to be a problem. Interestingly, I think one of my colleagues on the Talking Tennis YouTube channel, I think it was Damien Koost, I might be wrong, but he said that basically, same thing of like, tall guys can move, and Riley Opelka was one of the first players to do that and have a bit more to the game than just the serve, although that is their main weapon. And Giovanni and Pesci-Perico has come along and taken that to another level. So in any ways, Pesci-Perico on paper, to him anyway, is Riley Opelka 2.0.
For sure. So if you're going to the Australian Open, those are two players that for sure you're going to be able to see on a ground pass. I can almost guarantee you that. And with that, we are going to move on to our review or preview of the Australian Open. So the Australian Open, it's happening. I mean, it starts today. Man, what is time?
Okay, there's just a joke, listeners. The Australian Open has not happened. Do not panic and frantically turn on your televisions in the hope of seeing tennis. I mean, you will still see tennis if there's tennis going on in the right time zones as well. But you are not missing a Grand Slam unless you want to watch qualies, which are still worth watching.
Qualies are very much worth watching, and we would suggest it. In fact, if you happen to be in Melbourne, where the Australian Open is held, you can go and watch the qualies, kind of like you can do that during the US Open Fan Week, or I think Wimbledon's a little different because it's in a different location. Apparently not for long, but we will talk about that when Wimbledon comes around. For now, we're focusing on the Australian Open. But you can go watch qualies in person. So we're going to jump in and start talking about our Australian Open preview, the tournament, what it's like. And you might be thinking, well, I want to hear from someone who knows, not Nick and Anastasia, who haven't been to Melbourne, let alone the Australian Open. So we have asked a lovely, lovely content creator in the tennis space, Jess Adjua, to help us out. She lives in Sydney, Australia, and she has been to the Australian Open numerous times. So we thought, who better than to help us, help our listeners learn more about the Australian Open and what tickets are like and where to go than listening to Jess. And we're going to do a little fun game, Nick. I always make Nick do these games, and he's always like, meh, I don't know. You indulge me, Nick, which is nice.
I do indulge you. I am not necessarily a follower of these young trends who so wish to follow. There's multiple reasons.
Listener,
to Anastasia.
It might not seem like it, but I am older than Nick. But I get it. It doesn't seem like it at all. But no, Nick indulges my little fun games. And if you listened to, there is a podcast called Love It or Leave It. It's really far away from tennis. It's a political podcast. There might not be that crossover between our listeners and the listeners of Love It or Leave It. But he had a really cool segment, which was called Okay Stop. And when Jess sent in her video, I was very much, every time she would say something, I would just intuitively just be like, no, okay, stop. Let me tell you about it. So we're going to try it out. So if the technology works, which I think it will, we practiced and everything, it should work. And I hope you enjoy this little segment. It's like a little different way to talk about the tennis, and I think it's fun. So let's give it a shot. So I'm going to pull up Jess's video. And if you're watching this on YouTube, hello.
Hello.
Welcome to our of the video version. Oh my goodness, guys, it's Jess. There she is.
Nice to have you on the podcast.
Happy to have you on the podcast. So what we're going to do, I'm going to play the video, and Nick and I will react to the video as we go along. So here we go.
Hey guys, thank you so much for having me on the podcast to talk about the Australian Open. Literally my favorite time of the year. So I love yapping on about the Australian Open and attending. So yeah, look, I hope you are already enjoying the start of the new season and, you know, you're enjoying all the tennis that's going on. But let's talk about attending the Australian Open. So for me, I have been attending the Australian Open probably, I would say, close to 10 years. Not every year, on and off, probably every couple of years, me and my family will go, and usually we would attend in the first week, which is my personal favorite time to go to the Open, is during the first week, because you see...
Yeah, we've got to go at the same time there.
Maybe we'll signal. We'll learn something. But I wanted to stop there because isn't the first week the best time to go to a Grand Slam?
Absolutely. And I don't want to steal Jess's thunder because she goes into the reasons exactly why. Yeah, absolutely. Like, that is my favorite time to go. For multiple reasons. Like, there's so much more tennis going on. The fans are just so everywhere and so lovely to talk to, and provide great atmosphere, especially at a ground pass level. And as you know, I am going to be that person. It's cheaper to go, guys. Just saying.
You know what? Let's let Jess talk about it.
So much tennis. All your favorite players, you get to go to the practice courts and see players train. And I just feel like the energy during the first week is amazing. And it's also a little bit cheaper. So I feel like that is also a really big plus. But yeah, so I would say for like the last 10 years or so, I've been going. During COVID, that obviously threw a spanner in the works because I don't live in Melbourne, I live in Sydney. So I always try to make it a bit of a trip to attend the AO and make a bit of an event of it. And yeah, like for me personally, growing up, I used to watch the Australian Open, and it was always just a dream of mine to attend. Like, that was something I always wanted to do. So that's great that now it's something that I can do a bit more regularly.
Anastasia, when did you first go to the US Open?
Ooh, that's a good one. When did I first go to the US Open? It had to be 2000, either 2006 or 2008. I think it had to be one of those. And I wasn't even, like, I started out as a very, very casual tennis fan. Like, I just wanted to see Serena Williams. Like, that was kind of it. Like, that was why.
So Jess, apparently.
I was Jess. I just wanted to see Serena Williams. Before I got into the Roger and Rafa of it all, that was my thing. So the first chance I got, I remember getting a ticket. And this was, of course, before you learned about the little ways, before I knew that it was probably better for me to have gotten a ground pass. I remember getting a really expensive ticket, used every penny I had saved to go to one day at Arthur Ashe. And we know tennis now, there was no schedule. You just had to cross your fingers and hope. And not only did I get to see Serena on that day, I also got to see Venus from like the high up nosebleeds. And I was just the most excited ever. But yeah, I think it had to be 2008, if I remember. It's been a while. Yeah. But ever since then, I've gone every year.
Yeah. And it sounds very similar to Jess's story. I mean, I obviously depends on, clearly it wasn't necessarily a dream for you to go to the US Open. That wasn't this thing that you grew up with that like you really wanted to do. That really resonates with me, and that was my experience of Wimbledon, going there for the first time. So I went for the first time when I was 21, and that was I'm in London, let's see if I can get in type thing. But it was something that I've grown up with on the telly my whole life.
Right.
So the fact that like it very like what Jess has just said very much resonates with me as this was this thing that I've dreamed to go to, and I got to do that. And what has been amazing is that like I got to take mum eventually after that.
Yeah.
She'd been a couple of times, and like that she'd never been before, and I got there before her, but she was so jealous the first time I went. And now it's very much like I was so happy the first time I got to take her and show her around, and she finally got to be there. So some people wait longer than others to finally get to the thing, to a Grand Slam when they've always wanted to. But yeah, maybe this is one for us hardcore fans who've fallen in love with the sport a little bit, but you never forget the first time you go to a Grand Slam.
No, you never really do. And, I think it's a bucket list for a lot of people. So it's really an experience to have. But let's continue on.
So just a few tips and things to keep in mind if you're attending. So as I say, favorite time for me to attend is usually during the first week. That's when you get to see everybody. Like you're guaranteed to see your favorite players. For me, growing up, I always just wanted to see Serena Williams. That was like my number one. I wanted to see Serena. I also wanted to see Rafa and Gael Monfils. They were probably the three that I really wanted to see. But
Jess and I are actually the same person. It's fine. It's okay. It's me. It's fine. Moving on.
Serena in particular, I really wanted to see. And I was able to do that. And by going in the first week, it meant that it was a guarantee. I mean, Serena is someone that usually would just make it through anyway, like to a second week, but it was kind of a guarantee that way. So I think in terms of matches, the first round is good, but I really like the second round because I think the quality of the matches is just a little bit better, but there is still so much going on. And if you're going with kids, I think that's really good because I know for young kids, it's usually about wanting to see a particular player. And during the first round or the second round, you get to see that. So I would say the second round is good.
Yeah, really interesting insight from Jess there about going second round rather than first round. I can see why, because the players are a bit more warmed up as well. I mean, that's probably a good general thought to think about for slams. Although, having said that, first rounders are very close to it. I'd say either's fine. But also what she's saying here about, taking kids who are excited to see certain players, it's not something we've talked about on the podcast before, because I think in my mind, when I'm thinking of casual fans, I'm generally thinking of people who are kind of going on their own as like under their own steam. But I guess I've never thought of doing this as a family day out to go to the tennis. And what Jess raises here is something that's worth thinking about. So yeah, if you are parents listening to this, hey, maybe it might be fun, particularly a friendly Grand Slam, but particularly if you are around Melbourne.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I never really think of it as, people taking their kids and stuff, but it's very possible, people discover tennis at whatever age and then they want to go. And it is a fun thing for kids, I saw a lot of kids at the US Open almost seeing a kid fall in love with tennis is one of the cutest things ever. It's definitely a moment. It's almost like you're like, will I see you on a court one day? And then they'll be playing back this video of you dancing around, AKA Coco Gauff. But anyway, let's go.
But also the first round is good, and you can get like a ground pass, or you can attend one of the arena matches as well, or sessions, which is also a really good option. But by having a ticket to a arena match, you'll be able to then go everywhere, sort of thing. That's what I like. I like getting a ticket for usually Rod Laver Arena, and then you've got your seat for the day, so you can watch all the matches that happen there. Usually, you're paying more money for that because that's like the main arena, obviously. And during the day, you would get generally you get 3 matches. I don't know if they'll change it or not, but usually you would get 3 matches during the day session and then 2 in the night session. And that's where you'd see like Djokovic or Sabalenka or Swiatek, like the top, like world number 1 player. And then you kind of go down from there. So I like being able to have a ticket for that. And, you've got your assigned seat for the day and you can like come in and out, because I highly recommend like just actually experiencing everything. Don't just sit in the stadium. I mean, you can obviously, but I think experiencing everything is a really good idea. Like, why not? Particularly during the first week, because there is so much going on. And if you don't get to see your favorite player because the draws are announced, or who's the schedule of who's playing when and where isn't announced until the day before. So if you live in Melbourne, then you might be able to make a call. If you're like, I want to see Djokovic, and you want to wait, you might be able to get a ticket at the last minute, but that obviously can be a little bit risky. But if you're planning an actual trip, you don't necessarily know who you're going to see. So being able to at least know that you could see your favorite players training on the practice courts, which all tickets allow you to do, whether you get a ground pass or whether you get an arena ticket, then I feel like that's really good.
Okay, stop. So before we go on, I actually want to touch on this point that Jess makes about tickets and when to get them, because if you know from listening to the podcast, I am a risk taker. And I like to get my tickets at the last possible second so that I can see who I want to see. I mean, usually these days I just get a ground pass anyway. I just get a ground pass and go with it. But in I want to say in the last 2 years, especially in the US Open, it gets really crowded. It gets really crowded. And there's some arenas and stadiums where there are ground pass level seats that gets you a seat in there. But because it's so crowded, the lines are forever long. So you do want to get a seat at a specific, court, be it Rod Laver, like she said, or anywhere else, but then also wander the ground. So I think that's just a thing now where people get seats at these courts, but then spend time on the grounds and actually go from court to court and stuff and see what's happening, which, like she said, I highly suggest. Don't just go to your court and sit there. Because there's so much happening around the grounds.
Mum and I did at Wimbledon last year. We got Court 2 tickets, which is the equivalent of Grandstand at the US Open or John Cain Arena at the Australian Open. But we didn't stay there the whole day. There were a couple of matches we weren't bothered about. So we went on a wander around the grounds. And I think, that's something that I think a lot of people do. So, definitely consider that as an option if you are willing to fight your way through the business.
Yes. Yeah. And I have to, so there was another point, because in the US, what we deal with are resale tickets that are prohibitively expensive. Like they sell for 2 times, 3 times, 4 times as much as they actually cost. And I was thinking about this because if there's someone listening to this, for example, who happens to be in Melbourne, either lives in Melbourne or is nearby and wants to go, we're recording this on the 5th here, but it's the 6th over there. So the tournament's starting with qualifying and stuff. So tickets have already been sold. And I asked Jess, I messaged her and I said, what is the resale situation like in Australia? And right now I looked up the prices and stuff and tickets. There's still tickets available. So they're in, not every day, but there's some tickets available to go. But also she says that in Australia, the resale prices they're capped. So you can't go above a certain crazy level, which here we just don't have that. You could put a ticket down for $1 million. And if there's someone willing to pay you that for the ticket, good for you. But so it was nice to hear that even if you do want to get a resale for for a match or something that's sold out, it might not be the end of the world. We continue.
What else? I think so. Yeah, definitely. I think the first week is good if you're like very player specific, and the matches are still good. Like it's obviously the second week might be you're getting the quarterfinals and stuff like that, but I still think that the first week still produces some really good matches. How hard is it to get tickets? Obviously, getting them in advance would be highly recommended. I've never had an issue getting tickets, but usually like I'm super organized, so I try and get tickets right away as soon as they become available.
Are you sure she's the same person as you, Anastasia?
Actually, I take it back. We're different people.
But that might not always be possible. So you can risk it to go last minute. You might be able to get some tickets, but yeah, I think that can obviously be a little bit risky. And as I say, they have day sessions and night sessions as well. I would recommend that if you go, that you at least get a chance to experience a day session and a night session, because in Melbourne during that time of the year, it's just really good atmosphere, like during the day and the night. And I feel like you get the whole experience by being able to do that. And yeah, I just think that's a really fun thing to do. Okay, what else can I give you guys? So I guess in terms of ticket options, you have at the top is like Rod Laver Arena. So that's like your top, but obviously more expensive. But you'll see top players, but really expensive. Then you have Margaret Court Arena. And then you have, I've lost the name of the next court, what goes underneath that. But you have like John Cain Arena, which is included in a ground pass ticket. That is a really fun one as well. So even if you get just a ground pass ticket, you can still go to a arena match, but you just won't be able to go to Rod Laver Arena or Margaret Court Arena. I think Kia Arena is the other one as well, from memory.
Okay, stop.
So, yeah.
This is just a silly thing. So I don't think you and I talk about like big courts or stadiums as arenas.
No, we don't.
We don't call it that. I don't know if it's an Australian thing. Whenever she says arena, I keep thinking she means Arena Sabalenka. Sorry,
Kia
Jess.
Arena.
She just follows Arena around everywhere.
John Cain Arena. Oh, man. Okay, onwards.
You can still, whatever ticket you get, you'll be able to see all the practice courts. And I think what's really cool about the practice courts is that they're all so close together. So when you're, like, I think from last year at the Australian Open, I was like, I'm going to go watch Coco practice. And then I turned like to my right and there was Rublev. And now I'm like, where do I look? Like there's so much going on. So I definitely think that it's such a cool atmosphere. And then some of the other courts might have a doubles match on or another singles match going on. So now you're kind of like, there's so many matches and you're seeing everything. And you get to get up nice, close and personal. And if you're with kids and they want to get a ball signed, that's like your best bet because you might not necessarily get to do that in an arena. So that's why I think that if you get a ticket for an arena, still go explore because there's so much to do. Also entertainment wise, like there's good food and there's a lot going on. So definitely experience all of it if you get the chance. For me personally, as I say, I really like a Rod Laver Arena ticket, but I think a Margaret Court Arena ticket is still really good. So Margaret Court, you probably, like during the early stages, you'd see like, so if you're seeing Djokovic or Sabalenka on Rod Laver Arena, the type of players you'd probably see on Margaret Court would be like Casper Ruud or Hurkacz, Naomi Osaka. Well, no, Naomi probably would go on Rod Laver Arena. You never really know. You never really know, but I hope I'm kind of making sense, like the type of player that you might get on certain courts.
Okay, stop. So just to double down on her point, it's so like the first week of a slam, first of all, you just never know. I think United Cup was such a, not refreshing, maybe is the word, but we already knew the first 6 days what matches we were going to get. So you just don't get that in Grand Slams or other tournaments and things like that. But so with the lower, because the first week is so packed, what is it, Nick? 128 player draw?
128 player draws on obviously both men's and women's. That's
exactly.
That's the first couple of days of the slam. I mean, if you're thinking about that, that's 64. That's 128 matches total. So 64 per day in the first 2 days.
2 days. Yeah.
And does the same thing again days 3 and 4 when the second round starts and the double starts.
So it's very possible. I remember the first time I saw Iga playing, it was not at, Arthur Ashe. It was on Louis Armstrong. I saw her play for the first time in person, and she was currently number 1 in the world. So you never know where you might see a top player in those first 2 days, and you'd be surprised. You would be very lucky, and you might see a very, very top player play on a smaller arena.
Yes. And oh gosh, what have I done? I would also like to point out that there's also a sense of like the rules of the odds of it when you go and get a ground pass or something like that on whatever Grand Slam you go to, because Anastasia and I are talking very generically here. Like, if you want to know about the Australian Open, listen to Jess. But if you think about it, like Wimbledon in particular, when they have so few matches on the main courts, but even the US Open, right? It's 10 matches on the main 2 stadiums, the main 2 arenas. Same thing for Australian Open. Actually, no, it's less than that, because isn't Ashe like 2 matches in the day and 2 matches at night?
Yep.
So like 8 or 9. So realistically, that's what, you split that 50-50, that's 4-ish matches per, 4-5 matches per side of the men's or women's singles draw. It's going to be the same. And like that, when you think about how many matches there are and how many top players there are, there's a good chance you're going to see some big names.
Definitely.
By having those tickets, you can then still go to an arena like John Cain Arena, which is also really good. That's a good court just for atmosphere. So John Cain Arena and Court 3, they're really good because they're ground pass tickets as well, but you usually have to line up because that's where a lot of people go. Last year, I wanted to go into one of the outside courts or outside arenas that had Manarino playing Ben Shelton, and the lineup to get in was insane, to the point that it was like, it wasn't worth it. I might as well go watch some other tennis. So some of those outside courts can be a little bit tricky, but definitely, if you get the chance, there's those options as well, which is really good.
Okay, stop. Just briefly on this, I cannot stress enough, especially in the first few days of a Grand Slam, plan ahead. Have a list. Once the schedule does come out, which they come out the day before. So if you want to go on a Tuesday or whatever, the schedule will be out by Monday afternoon. Take a look at the schedule, look at the matches you want to see, look at where they're being played, and just make a little itinerary for yourself. Yes, be flexible that you can change things around, because we all know it's tennis. A match is going to go 5 hours and one's going to go an hour and a half. They'll have different timing, but just have a loose schedule, because it does. And I think this is something Jess mentioned earlier in the video. It gets really hectic. It gets very busy. There are tons of people around. There's food, there's games, there's stuff. You can get pretty overwhelmed, I have to say.
Yeah, I would agree with that, especially when there's always going to be a player that's slightly more popular, or there's a match that's kind of by word of mouth suddenly that everyone knows that's going to be really, really good. You've got to really plan your day around, like, you want to make sure you get to that match. And I would say even make a schedule, like, underline some matches that you really want to see. Like, if you want to say, like, I do not mind if I miss some of these matches, but I want to see this one, and plan your day around that one or 2 or 3 that you really, really want to make sure that you get to see. And I think you've got less chance of being disappointed. You can be a bit more tactical with how you make your way around.
Totally.
And okay. So I think top 3 tips that I have for the AO. Number 1, I would say, if you want to see specific players, go during the first week. I think that is probably number 1, because you never know, upsets happen all the time. So your favorite player might lose. So definitely think that's a good idea to go during the first week if you're keen on seeing certain players. And yeah, that would be my number one tip, but definitely explore, even if you get a certain ticket for a particular arena. Second, if you're going to get a Rod Laver Arena ticket, I would really consider looking for shaded seats. So when you don't have to, but during that time in Australia, it is so hot. It can be really hot, usually is. So, and middle of the day, like if it could be 35 degrees, which I don't know what that is Fahrenheit. That's probably like 85 plus maybe. Yep. I'm not sure. So it can get really hot. And I know the first year when I went with my family, we didn't know about that seating situation with the shade and with the sun. And it was so hot to the point that you didn't even want to sit in the arena and watch, because it was just so uncomfortable, because the sun is glaring down at you if the roof is open. So if the roof is open, it can be really painful. So if you're very particular that you don't want to sit in the sun, then get shaded tickets. When you book for the tickets on the Ticketmaster website, it does actually tell you what's shaded and what's not shaded, but it will cost you more if it's shaded. And again, it is luck of the draw. You could go on a day where it's cloudy and it doesn't matter, but definitely keep that in mind when you're trying to get a ticket.
Okay, stop.
If you
Yeah, this is something we've not talked about before.
No.
As a fan,
No.
Planning around, thinking about the sun, and kind of, again, it's one of those things you need to be particularly mindful of when you've got kids. I remember Wimbledon's interesting because I'd say the best seats in the house are out in the open, but even obviously there's no shelter when you're on a ground pass any of the courts. It's only centre court and court 1 that have any kind of shaded areas. When I went this year to centre court, I was in a shaded area and it was freezing, because British summers are very different to Australian summers. However, if I'd been out of the shaded area, it would have been boiling hot. The first time I was on centre court back in 2019, I got sunburned because I was an idiot and did not wear sun protection. So don't feel sorry for me, Anastasia. I brought this upon myself. But
wear sunscreen, everyone.
Yeah, if you go to watch the tennis, it's always hot. Wear sunscreen, even on a night session. No, with that, I think it's something we've never really talked about before, but brief thing on Wimbledon, that's something that you need to prepare for. Australia is even more hot. Wimbledon, if it's a British heat wave, you will get mid 20 degrees centigrade. I don't know Fahrenheit because we don't use it. Whereas, because I saw you, I was about to ask you, is she about right with her Fahrenheit conversion? And you were nodding along and saying yes. But what's the hottest you've ever experienced at a US Open? Because I think US Open's more of a humid heat, whereas the Australian summer's much more dry.
So this year was pretty good. This was fine. But if everyone, when I say this year, sorry, I mean 2024, still at that time where I'm deciding what year it is. But if everyone remembers, there was a match between Medvedev and Rublev in 2023 where I was afraid for their safety. It was unbearable. I was sitting, it was one of the times where I got, in fact, weirdly, that was 2023. That was the last time I've actually been in Arthur Ashe, but it was so hot as a spectator not moving. I could not even imagine what it was like playing, but it was awful. I think it definitely hit the 90s. So it hit the 90s, but it felt like over 100.
That's higher than Australia.
That was high. That's higher than Australia. And here's the thing: it's with humidity. On the East Coast, it's just so humid. So you just feel like you are in a boiling pot that's just slowly boiling. So it was the most uncomfortable I've ever felt, ever watching tennis. It to the point where I remember being there thinking they should call it. We should not be playing tennis. We should stop. So, yeah.
Okay, we've done US Open. I don't want to go labor too long at this point, but I'm curious about this. You've now done all of the US 1000s. Now, you've done Miami multiple times. You've done
Yes.
Indian Wells once and Cincinnati once. What's kind of the situation with those? Because like Miami is also like humid heat. And I
So
don't know what it's like
yes,
in March. And Indian Wells is in the desert. So I would
right.
imagine that's going to be hot all the time.
Yes. So weirdly, because Miami and Indian Wells are in the spring, the temperatures don't go as high, but Miami is very similar to the US Open as in it's humid. So you get that sort of sticky, not nice feeling. California, Indian Wells is a dream because it's dry. So you don't, it got hot, but it was fine. It was, you were wearing shorts and you were walking around and it was glorious. Wear sunscreen, definitely. I think that's also why a lot of tournaments, they hand out sunscreen at the entrance. Like there are a lot of free samples of sunscreen. So that would, Cincinnati was the temperature last year where I went to Cincinnati wasn't that bad, but I would expect it to be more on the humid side if it got really, really hot. I do have to say being in California and having it be in the dry heat is helpful. I do know for sure though that the reason why they have it in the spring is that in the summer at Indian Wells, it's a no-go. We do not play tennis outside because it really is the heat of the desert. So even though it's dry heat, it gets even hotter. I think last year at Indian Wells, I think it hit like 105, 10 in that sort of Indian Wells desert area. So definitely not playable.
No, definitely not, which is why they have it in March. But I guess there's the last thing on that point about what Jess is talking about with finding tickets with shade. Wimbledon, you have no choice. Pretty much, you get the ticket, you get the ticket, and you get no shade on a ground pass. Pretty much,
Yeah.
unless you get very specific. You're on a very specific area of one specific court that just happens to have it. I'm thinking about other British events, and again, they are makeshift temporary stadiums. They don't put covers over,
Right.
for like Queen's Club or anything like that. I would imagine US Open, you do have that choice, but I don't know what the design of Ash or Armstrong is. And I think from what I've seen of the 1000s, they are much more open air stadiums.
Yes. So 1000s it depends actually. I feel like the main stadium at Indian Wells and actually Miami, they do have a bit of a lip. So they are areas of covering in both. Cincinnati, not so much. Cincinnati was more all open. But going to the Grand Slams, the US Open works exactly the same as the Australian Open in this case, where if you go and you buy a ticket, it shows you can see how the shade works throughout the day. And I wouldn't say it's more expensive, actually. It's just they sell out quicker. If you know, so if you once tickets go on sale and you open it, it's almost like those sections just go immediately. So it's not a different price, but they definitely sell out immediately. And then the only things left are the direct sun, which can be brutal.
I guess like this is where you can feed into this like any shared experience, because I don't have that option for the tournament I've been in the UK. I guess,
but you have to think of weather in a different. You have to think of weather in a different way, really, with the rain.
Bring a coat, always.
Bring a coat. And an umbrella.
But like I have, especially when you're at Wimbledon and like you have to, if you queue, you are there like over 12 hours. So like the weather can change quite dramatically, not just in terms of rain, but also temperature. So you do have to prep very differently. But I guess you don't know until the day before what you're going to need. Like British summer's very, very different. But is shade something that you've ever thought about, or you know other people who've thought about? Yeah,
100%. 100%. If you are in the sun in New York when it's a hot day, it's just not even fun anymore. Like she mentions, it's not, all you're thinking about is how uncomfortable you are. So it is something I think about a lot. So, and sometimes you can't you can't avoid it. You're just like, well, these are the tickets that are available and I do really want to see this match. So that's when it comes down to prepping, where it's sunscreen, make sure you have a hat, make sure you have water. And I think this is just normal now in most slams, but you can bring an empty reusable bottle.
Yeah.
And a lot of times what I do is I bring an empty reusable bottle. I go to a stand. I'm like, just fill this with ice, please. And they're usually very accommodating. And I just live on that when you're in the sun, because at least you'll have that sort of cooling sensation at least once in a while. But that, I think, comes with all the planning that she's talking about. So if you can't avoid being in the sun, or in the Australian Open case where it's more expensive to be in the shade and you don't want to pay that much, you just have to prepare. Be prepared. Be a Boy Scout. Anyway, or Girl Guide. Back to the tennis.
You're like particular on being in the sun or not, because it can be really, really rough. And then my third tip would be weekend matches, or Friday, Saturday, Sunday, midweek of the tournament is really fun, but next level busy. It can be super, super busy. It's busy the whole time of the Open, but the weekend is on another level. So I think if you're not escaping the crowds whatever day you go, but if you really don't want to be like dealing with crowds, I would not recommend the weekend, because it can be a bit crazy, because then you have just the casuals in the local area that just come in and just get a ground pass, have a walk around and just have a look, which means it's a really good atmosphere, but can be overwhelming. I personally don't love crowds. Like, I deal with it to go to the tennis, but I found it overwhelming for me the weekend. It was just a little too much that I was like, okay, if I didn't have an assigned seat where I could just kind of comfortably sit, then I don't know how I would manage. But yeah, again, as I say, the atmosphere is good though, because there's so much happening, there's entertainment, there's plenty going on to experience, but just bear that in mind if you're not loving the idea of walking around.
Yeah. Again,
yeah.
Jess raises something here that we've never talked about on the podcast, but when she's talking, she's mentioned it here, and it's made me think, yeah, we can't assume that new tennis fans are going to be okay with crowds, and maybe you need to think about that.
Yeah.
And I think any slam or any big tennis event, this is going to be the case. The Friday, Saturday, Sunday is always going to be pretty busy. Weirdly, Wimbledon Monday is also pretty popular. I don't know what that is in like other countries. Maybe we're more willing, but it's much easier to take time off in the UK.
Well, it's actually similar at the US Open, because guess what? That middle weekend always falls on Labor Day weekend, and the Monday is off. So those 4 days, packed.
And actually, that's a good point, because something Jess didn't mention was Australia also falls on a public holiday in Australia, Australia Day. So that's also really busy when that's all going on, and like everyone's off. So yeah, that's one of these things that maybe think about what day, if you can go midweek, it's a little bit, well, it might be a little bit calmer. It does depend on maybe who's playing. Like I don't know about like other slams at Wimbledon. If Murray is playing, there's more people on the ground. I don't know, like maybe that might happen if you get another big US star, like if Coco's playing, or Serena, back when Serena was playing, like where there's just more people milling around. You've talked a lot about how the US Open is sold out anyway, and there's just so much people moving around. Sounds like Australia is pretty similar, and like it's just busy in general. But I guess it's one of those things that maybe we should have warned people before, but maybe it's like be prepared for being in crowds, because I'm similar to Jess. I don't like crowds. If I could avoid being in a crowd of people, I absolutely would. That is probably where my claustrophobia kicks in.
Yeah. No, I completely agree that it is something we've never brought up, but probably should have, because those weekends they're pretty packed for sure. Okay. Last bit.
With all those crowds. But don't think that the other days aren't busy, because it's busy the whole time. It's a Grand Slam. You at some point you just have to deal with the crowds, I think. And Yeah, I think on an additional note to that would be attend a night session if you can, and go to two. Sorry, this video is going really long. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I just feel like there's so many things to talk about. Two other things is if you can get a day and a night session, because if it's a nice day in Melbourne, then it's just nice to enjoy the summer, Australian summer, during the day and the night. And if you've got a ground pass and you want to sit outside, because they have the like Garden Square where you can just watch tennis on the big screen and get some food and just relax, that's also really nice to do that as well. So that's another option that you could do that. But yeah, I think experience the both sessions, and also attend 2 days if you can. So if you want to go based on a round, for example. So if you're going to go on round 1, go day 1 and 2, or now it's 3 days, but say, I think you get what I mean. If you want to go to round 2, make sure you go to both days, because then you get to experience the whole round if that's how you're planning to do it. Experience both, and then that way you're going to be able to experience the whole breadth of everything. You get to see all the players that are there. And yeah, I think it also means there's less room for disappointment, because you'll be able to experience a full round with all the players that are there. So yeah, they're probably my main tips. I'm sorry, this video has definitely gone longer than I planned it to be, but sometimes when I'm talking about this, I kind of just yap on. But anyway, thank you so much. I can't wait to see what happens with the Open and hear what you guys have to say about the Open. And yeah, enjoy the tennis that's to come. I'll see you guys later. Bye.
Jess, you should not apologise for going on too long, because we made it 3 times as long, and in fact we took half an hour before we even got to talking to you. So yeah, you have not made this long. We are forever talkers, Anastasia and I, so believe me, you have talked the least out of this.
Thank you so much to Jess Adjua. I am going to put a link to all of her social media, because she is going to be at the Australian Open for all 3 weeks. She gets there at the beginning for qualifying, and then she stays through the tournament, and she's going to be producing videos and things about the Australian Open. So please follow her. And thank you so much, Jess, for joining us, even if it was just by video. So we're back. That was fun. I actually enjoyed that, talking through it with you, because we both watched this video separately, but talking through it with you, I was like, oh my goodness, you're so right. We never really talk about the crowds or the weather or anything like that. And those are such important things to talk about if you're going to a tournament for the first time. Like she said, when the first time her family went to the Australian Open, they didn't even think about the sun, and then they're stuck in the sun, and it can be really uncomfortable. So I think there were so many great tips there. I like how she ended with, you can just be on a ground pass and watch on the big screen. Like, most Grand Slams have these seated areas that are actually really well set up, and the chairs are reclining and things like that. And it can be actually like a really nice break from either being in an arena.
Unless you're at Wimbledon, where they make you bring coats or picnic blankets to sit on. Chairs are a luxury.
Chairs are too much.
For the
but it's Henman Hill. Oh man, that was actually really, really fun. I enjoyed that. But we have we've yapped on forever and ever, but it's the Australian Open. It's almost a Grand Slam. So let us wrap up with, as always, our players of the fortnight. And I will do a better job this year, Nick, of keeping track of the players that we have every single, episode, so that we don't lose track or anything like that. But
we were talking about this before. Can I know we're recording.
Yeah.
Can I propose an idea?
Yes.
We're obviously talking about, do we want to try and avoid saying people we've said before? Can I make this easier on ourselves, that you're allowed to say the same player you've had the previous season once?
Yes.
You're allowed to do that. Obviously, you've got to be very careful when you use it, but then it just means you don't need to worry about it. Obviously, so we can say another season 1 player again, but we once we've said our season 2 player, they play during season
That's
2.
it.
That's it until the end of the year.
That's it. So if you're listening to the podcast for the first time and you're like, what are they talking about? Player of the fortnight for Nick and I is the player who over the 2 weeks has impressed us that we think you should follow along with. Usually a new player who you can watch on a ground pass at a tournament. So if you're here for us to pick Sinkaraz or Iga every single week, we already did that and we're not doing that anymore. That was like our first few episodes. But no, player of the fortnight is someone who you can watch on a ground pass, is up and coming, and we really think is worth your time to follow and pay attention to and watch their matches. So I will start. This is almost on a theme of the Challenger documentary we did, and maybe because I have met him and spoken to him. My player of the fortnight, the first one of the season, is Ethan Quinn. Ethan Quinn is a young, I think he's 21 or 20, 21 or 22, around that age. Really young player from the United States. He won the NCAA singles championship a year ago and decided to go pro. It was a rocky start for him. So he didn't, it wasn't almost a Ben Shelton kind of run where it's like he joined the pro tour and was, hitting his stride. So it's definitely been a little bit of a rocky road, but he ended last year really well. He was playing really well. He won that Champagne Challenger that I was at, and he has started this year pretty well. He got to the finals of the Cambria Challenger, which was Canberra.
Yeah,
okay, great.
Canberra.
The Canberra Challenger in Australia, and he got to the finals and he played against Joao Fonseca, who is on fire at the moment. But I wanted to give this moment to Ethan Quinn because I think he's doing really well. I was watching some of his videos from the off season, and it looks like he was working super hard over the off season. And I think it's just a new young American to follow along. I got to talk to his coach as well, and I was asking them, is he going to go for the Australian Open? It's like, what is his plans? And they've taken the slow and steady approach. So they're willing to just grind it out in the challenger circuit and just have him get better at playing tennis. And I think that is such a measured, smart way of doing things. So you might not see him at the Australian Open, but follow him on the Challenger Tour. You can watch his matches for free on ATP Challenger TV, which I'll put a link in our description. But Ethan Quinn is my first player of the fortnight this season.
Nice. Well, Ethan, you got a lot to live up to. It's very frustrating when he breaks out on tour, he gets a big result, and you're like, I already picked him. For a challenger, no less. I was spoiled for choice, I think, this week. Polina Kudermetova, we mentioned earlier, would be the obvious choice in some ways. Young breakout player doing really, really well and getting a set of Arina Sabalenka in a final. I mean, no, not many people can say they've done that, especially in the country of Australia. I also wanted to say, although she's not eligible, Iga Swiatek brought all the entertainment at the United Cup. She played 4 consecutive matches that everyone on Twitter is now debating over which is better, because it was just she didn't win all of them, but it was just like she brought the entertainment. But the player of the fortnight, I'm actually going to take you all the way back, almost to the start of the United Cup, and to something we referenced right at the top of the show. The match between China and Brazil was notable for the fact that we were expecting this to be a clash between Zheng Qinwen and Beatrice Haddad-Maia. Zheng Qinwen then pulled out, and in her place was substituted, and I think I'm getting her name pronunciation right, but if there's any Chinese Mandarin speakers who can correct me, please do. Zhao Jinyu. She was ranked 175. She was China's second best player, and I expected her to walk out on court against Beatrice Haddad-Maia and get crushed. I'm going to be honest, especially since Haddad-Maia has a reputation for basically exhausting people, and you've got to be really hardy to hang with her. Not only did Zhao hang with her, she beat her. She outlasted Beatrice Haddad-Maia and got a valuable point for China. And then she did it again in their next match, in her next match, who was she playing? Who was in that group? But the Haddad-Maia one is the one that's kind of really stuck with me because that was also another epic three-setter.
Yeah.
And
I want to say it was Laura Siegmund.
Yeah, it was Laura Siegmund. Similar kind of player.
Yeah.
And that meant that that her efforts basically meant China qualified for the quarterfinals, and I think she must have burned herself out because then Zhang Shui took over, a much more experienced player, but Zhao Xinyu was like, this is my stage. I'm playing against the top players in the world, a really experienced, big stadium, first time most people had heard of her, and she came out and she crushed it. I don't know if she's in Australian Open qualies. If she is, go see her. But yeah, that was her breakout moment, and I certainly think there's a possibility that you could see her name at a ground pass near you, and that is why I am naming her as player of the fortnight. Remember the name.
No, I think we talked about when we were previewing the United Cup in that episode, that one of the things that we love about the United Cup is you get to see these players that you usually don't see on tour. You know, the joke is you only see them come up during the United Cup because they're the third, fourth player of their country, but they're, maybe ranked 700 in the world or something like that. And again, like you said, when Qin Wen was subbed out, I thought, well, that's it. And Beatrice had check her off of the win already. I was wrong. I love being wrong like that because Zhao was such a joy to watch. Just seeing her fight, which was what she was doing. She was like, I am going to fight for this win. And she got China to, I think she really, without her, they wouldn't have gone, into the quarterfinals.
Again, it's one of those things like United Cup can bring out this thing where like, these players can become MVPs for their country and they're not even the leading name for their country.
Correct.
That's one of these things. One of the great things that comes out from it. We've seen that time and again. I think the closest equivalent maybe for the Czech team would be Thomas Mahac, who is much higher ranked, like he's top 30, but everyone was talking about Karolina Mukova and he kept on getting put against top 10 or former top 10 ATP players, and he acquitted himself really, really well.
Yeah, yes, he did. Man, this was a long one, Nick, but I actually had a lot of fun doing it. I'm happy. I'm excited for the new year. I love when we start off a new season like this, where you're just like, I can't wait to get to the next tournament because you just kind of want to see where these players are at and what's happening. So really exciting times ahead. Stay tuned. Follow us on social media. We will be posting as much as possible. And here's the thing, guys. I started doing something on our social media, which I called a ground pass rundown, which is basically me the next day waking up and watching the matches and then like commenting on what I thought was fun or what a lot of people were talking about. Because we just cannot watch the matches live in Australia. We can't watch all of them live. Some of them we will, but all of them is a no.
I think if we were to tag team this, and let me see if I can get this right for you, Anastasia. So, like for me, the day sessions in Australian Open start bang on midnight, whereas for you they would start about 7 p.m. So you can watch the beginning of the day session and a lot of the day session. But at some point, like when it gets to the night session, that's just a no-go. I wake up when the night session starts.
Which is...
I
don't know which I prefer.
Yeah.
I don't know if I would prefer to just wake up with the night session, That might be actually cool. But yeah, it's really tough. And I think, we'll just wake up, we'll comment on what we can, but follow us on social media. We will have all the updates there. We'll be back with you next week, either with a mini pod or a full pod. We will see.
And I know maybe we shouldn't plug someone else's stuff. If Jess is going, follow Jess. She'll keep you up to date.
Follow Jess 100%. Again, I will have all of her socials. She will keep you up to date. She will be there. It will be great. So definitely follow Jess. It was really nice having her on. Maybe she'll join us some other time on the podcast. But for now, thank you. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for everyone who's listening. And we will see you on the next episode. Bye, guys.